You're probably watching this video because you have an assignment that states that you need to turn in work that is going to measure either 800 pixels wide or 600 pixels tall. Probably unlikely that you would hit both measurements, but you will hit one of those measurements. So let me tell you the last step first, because this step is so important. I want to make sure that you understand what the last thing you need to do. The last thing you need to do is open up the file that you're making in Photoshop and do two things. First is to check its size, and the second is to make sure that it does not have any exposed white space, unnecessary slivers of white showing. So first the size. In Photoshop, with that image open, you go to Image, Image Size. If you do not see pixel dimensions of either 800 wide or 600 tall, and within 2 pixels, right? This measures 601, that's fine. So this would be correct. It is 600 pixels tall. It's not 800 pixels wide, but it's very rare that you hit both measurements. The key thing is not to be over on either one by more than like a pixel or two. So 800 pixels wide is good. 805, not good. 600 pixels tall is good. 605, 604, not good. Anything more than that. So that's the first things that you check for. And I'll explain more about the min and max sizes in a second. If that looks good, you click OK. You're good on the size. Then the next thing that you do is you just hit the F key on the keyboard. Make sure nothing else is selected or you don't have the text key or anything like that. So you could just come up here, grab the selection tool and just click nothing. And then you hit the F key once, changes your background a little bit, hit it again, gives you a nice black background. So if you had any white slivers showing, they would really stick out like a sore thumb. Do it again, and it's basically a cycle. All you have to do is just hit F enough times and you end up back where you started. So now I'm assuming that most of the work that you've done in my class will be in Illustrator, so this is what you'll use. But the last example I will show you, we will look at stuff that was completed in Photoshop. Okay, so for now, let's assume that you have one or more pieces in Illustrator and you're not sure whether it's going to end up being 600 pixels tall or 800 pixels wide. So I have a couple different examples of different heights and widths. So to me, the easiest way to do this, let me get rid of those guides here. Easiest way to do this would be to make a box that is 800 pixels wide, 600 pixels tall, and all you're going to do is try to maximize that. And when I say box, let's actually make an artboard. So we'll click on the artboard tool, we'll come down here where there's plenty of space, and we'll click and we'll just start to make a box. But then we'll go up here and we'll fine tune it by typing in the width and the height. So for the width, I'm going to type in 800 px for pixels. Now you won't be able to see, or I'm sorry, that was the width. If I didn't say width, I meant to say width. And then the height, you won't be able to see it because it's over here. I need to uncheck the box. It says constrain width and height proportions because I want to be able to enter them in independently. So for the height, I'm typing in 600 px for pixels. And if you are set to inches, what that will translate to is 11.11 inches wide and 8.33 inches tall. So now to get out of artboard mode, I'll just simply click on the selection tool. So let's say that this is the first piece that I'm going to work with. So what I'm trying to do is maximize the space here so that it is either going to be one of those two dimensions. Now, if you need white space around it, like let's say for example that this chunk here represents your logo and your logo type solution and you need some space around it, then that's yet another issue. So let's tackle that one first because my students make a lot of logos. So how much white space? Well, we probably talked about this in class. Usually you want to use like a measuring stick of something that's in your work. So in this case, since it's a box, that would be a pretty easy thing to use. So I like to make homemade measuring sticks just by dragging with the rectangle tool. And so what I would say is I probably need about that much white space above, that much white space, or above and below. So I'm just going to make these touch, and then typically a good starting point would be to put the same amount of space on the left and right that you have on the top and the bottom. So I'm going to hold down the shift key, get my cursor to look like that, do that, hold down the option key, make another copy. So this would be the amount of space that I need to maximize in here. Now what I need to do is then occupy this box so that that works out perfectly. So what I'm going to do is first line it up, say like at the top and the bottom, and then I am going to either make it smaller or bigger, in this case smaller, so that it does not stick outside of the box, either on the top or bottom or on the left or right. So holding down the shift key, I make that just fit in the box like that. So I can see that in this case, and it makes sense since it's very long, that the one that I'm going to be maximizing would be the width, right? It's going to end up being 800 pixels wide. But as we can see, if I left this box alone at 800 by 600, it would be too tall. So now all I have to do is come in, grab the artboard tool. So we're simply going to resize the artboard so that it matches up there. Then all we have to do is get rid of our temporary measuring sticks and export this per the instructions given in class, which most likely were to export it as a JPEG. So then you just simply go File, Export, select JPEG as the format from this drop down, check Use Artboards, check the artboard that you're using, which back in Illustrator you can see right there it tells me which artboard I'm using. So I want to put just 5 in there. I don't want to do 1 through 5. I need to give it a name, which your name file naming convention for me is always last name underscore first name underscore project description. So we'll pretend this is a logo project, and then save it in a place where you know where it's at. So for my purposes here, I'll just put it in the desktop and export that thing. We want it to be RGB since it's for the web, full quality JPEGs, and typically we can leave all of these the same. Well, I take that back. Resolution, we want to make sure that that's at 72 per the instructions given in class. The compression method, baseline standard is fine, and anti-aliasing type optimize should be fine as well. Click OK. That should show up on our desktop. So to get to the desktop, I'm just going to click on a blank place, Option Command H to hide everything, and then this should be it right here. Drag that into Photoshop and make those 2 checks that we did before. So image size, looking to see that I have a pixel dimension. In this case, since it's wider than taller, it's going to be the width that hits. So there it is, 800 within 2-3 pixels. We're good. Height, all we care about on the height is that it is less than 600 in this case. So again, it's either going to be 800 wide or 600 tall, but not bigger in either one. So no more than 800 or 801 or 802, and no taller than 600. So if we got that, we click OK. In this case, since we have white space around it, we don't even really need to do the F trick, but it's still a good idea just to see it against a full black background. Now let's go back into Illustrator and let's do it as if this piece right here was the full thing that we wanted. No white space around it. In other words, let's pretend it's a wide format poster. So we still want to do the thing where we take an artboard and we make it 800 pixels wide by 600 pixels tall. That's always going to be our starting point. And we're going to take our piece and we're going to maximize it in that space. So once again, we can tell since it's so wide that it is going to be the width we're after. But here's where we have to be a little bit careful that we're not just a little bit under, because that's where that screaming white space shows up. So what we want to do is just really zoom in here and make sure we have like the equivalent of a bleed where we're just a touch out, right? We don't want to what do you call it, lose part of our artwork. It's the same like when you go to a printer, you got to allow them just a little bit room for margin. So you want kind of the same thing for us. Okay, so now we're going to look at this other side and just make sure we're just a touch out. As long as we're just a touch out, that's okay. And then we need to get rid of the excess artboard. So we grab the artboard tool, we bring this up just a little bit more than we need to, and then we export. Once again, same exact steps, and should end up with the same exact results here. Just make sure you give it a name and so on, proper name. So here it is, opened up in Photoshop, image size. There we go. There's our 800 pixels within a pixel or two. The height, is it greater than 600? Nope. Is it 600? Nope, but it doesn't need to be. So don't get hung up on those numbers. You just have to hit one of them and not be over either of them. So resolution 72, we're good there. I'm going to click on OK, close this. I'm going to hit the F key a couple times, see this against a black background. Make sure there's no white showing, so I'm good there. Okay, back in Illustrator, let's take a look at another example. Let's look at another one that's wider than it is tall. And I just want to show you this because you might think that if it's wider than it is tall, it's always going to be 800, but that's not the case. So let's go back to our artboard, and once again, we'll make its width 800 pixels wide. We will make its height 600 pixels px tall, and we will place our work inside of it and maximize it. So you can see what happens is if we try to go for the width, we get too tall. And remember, we need to stay inside of this box. So we're going to make it just as tall as we can, making sure that we have just a little bit sticking out here, and just a little bit also at the bottom. And then what we'll have to do is just grab that side with the artboard tool, bring it in, and so you can see this is just a little bit too short. So what I'm going to do is get over here, grab the corner, hold down the shift key to constrain the proportions and make it just a little bit bigger. Now I know from experience that it'll still be big on the side because whenever you make something wider in that method, you pull from this direction, and that's the direction that it increases. Okay, so now all we need to do is really zoom in somewhere in the middle here where that little handle is going to show up when we click on the artboard tool, and then make the artboard smaller, just a touch smaller than that, and then export it, and I'll show you what that looks like in Photoshop. Okay, so here we are in Photoshop. We've got a height of 601 and a width of 741, so that meets the criteria. We hit the F key a couple times to look for any blinding white spots, and we are good there as well.